What's it like in West Virginia right now?
Well, I mean, this is the quarantine so far this is sort of my lifestyle. So, I mean, there hasn't been like a really big change for me. I've had to put all of my courses, online. I teach at a local community college. So that's been kind of stressful. It's, it's one of those things where I think like on one day you'll think people are taking it seriously, but I took the dog for a walk around the block yesterday, and just across the street somebody had brought a four-wheeler over for some kids, and I bet there was like 15 kids on the back porch. But so yeah, I mean, I've just been at the house. Yeah, and I think here it was fun when the weather was like rainy and it was cold, but like yesterday it was 70 degrees, and that's when I noticed it. Just taking the dog for a walk. It was like, oh, people are out and about. Oh, neighbors are visiting one another.
Yeah, I feel like that's why people are getting more serious about shutting stuff down, but
yeah,
it's for the best. It's just so like, I feel like I feel my most balanced when I don't realize what's happening, or when this stuff is real.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's something else. It's something else.
So this hasn't affected your routine at all?
No, not at all. I know that's a horrible thing to say. Like, I feel a certain element of guilt. I mean, it's actually probably helped my routine because I'm in the middle of like book writing mode. I think it's affected Julia more so because I've realized too, like I'm becoming more hermit-like the older I get. And I don't know. I don't even really know if I have many friends. And so
That sounds very relatable right now. I don't know.
yeah,
Like, it
yeah.
gets easier to just kind of like stay at home as you get
Even
older.
with classes, like I was coming home in the evenings and I was in this room for 2 hours, and now I'm just doing that a little bit. Like I was home by 3 o'clock most days, even teaching all day. And so now I'm just doing that a little bit earlier, and I'm reading more.
Your usual reading, or are you? Because we were just talking about those of us that are in the store about people that are buying stuff that seems to be very like directed towards what's going on right now.
No, I'm not interested in that. I was thinking though the other day about like quarantine literature and stuff, and I read Thucydides' History of the Peloponnesian War. I'd read it in college, and I've been reading a lot of weird books that no one else would want to read over the course of the past year or two since I've been working on this book I'm on. And there's the plague is in Athens. I think he describes the death of Pericles because of the plague. Julia read Daniel Defoe's Journal of the Plague Year,
Okay.
which is a novel. I guess he was a child when the plagues happened in the middle part of the 17th century. And H.G. Wells was a big fan of the book. Like, she knows War of the Worlds really well too, and she was like, "There's like parallels in terms of structure between those two books." And one of my favorite books is Samuel Pepys. The Diary of Samuel Pepys, and you have all that stuff of the plague that Defoe would have lived through as a child that he later puts into a novel. So, I mean, I've been thinking about it. I'm not interested in disease, pandemic literature, whatsoever. So I've just been doing my own weirdo type reading, but just a little bit more so than when I'm working.
You're actually the second person I've spoken with through my second video today. I don't know if you know who Hernan Diaz is. He wrote In the Distance. Did you ever?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I just chatted with him, and he was talking about how he wrote a dissertation once about isolation as it's represented in literature.
Yeah.
And gave me a bunch of recommendations of books about that kind of fit into what people are feeling right now. So I think that's interesting that you also kind of have.
Yeah. Yeah, with like the Peeps Diary, what's great about it, he doesn't write a ton about it, but it's in because the diary takes place over about the course of a decade. He kept it, and he's coming home from work one night, and there's a dead body in the alley, and he's like, "Ooh!" But it's done with humor and levity, like it's like this really, this really dark. English humor. I think from the Peeps Diary too, or maybe we associate with Monty Python. I think is kind of first used. So I'm not real big, and even today you can even see, and I know publishers are probably in panic mode as well. With how will we sell books? I think that it's something that's been going on, or at least I've noticed it more so, like the last 5-6 years of current events being connected to writing, which and people's choices in what they're reading. I don't know, when Trump was elected, it was read 10 novels dealing with dictators or whatever. And I'm not interested in those sorts of things usually.
Yeah, it's interesting as someone like working in a bookstore and being a buyer and seeing just how, like, I'm the same way where I'm not really looking for stuff that's topical.
Yeah, exactly. I guess that's maybe a better word
Yeah,
to use.
and then having to like look at catalogs full of books that are just like about stuff that I know is going to sell but doesn't really like interest me, and just how much.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, even if you think of, my dad, he's a big West Virginia Union Democrat, and loves to just constantly go on about Trump and Gary Mack, that's his name, his pessimistic worldview. And that's what I told him the other day. I was like, "You had polio, right? You had polio. Like you've gone through, if not a similar situation. Nation states go through situations similar to this from time to time. This one feels particularly scary, I guess, because we haven't had one in so long, right, in our historical memory."
Yeah, I think we've been lucky with how little we've really had to, because I was talking to some people at work yesterday about that, and like 9/11's obviously like the big thing that's
Yeah, of course.
and everything, but I feel like we, like as a country, there were people obviously that were like had separate kind of feelings about how we reacted to that, but for the most part, like everybody kind of like there was something to like focus on, and so just like foreign to us and surreal that we can't wrap our heads around what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, for sure.
Or how it's going to end.
Or our life is so like connected to stores and shopping and purchasing and buying, and which is modern life. I'm not knocking it. Julia, she's been obsessed with. She took a disease course in college that she always has all these facts, and she has been listening to an audiobook on pandemics. She's taken great courses on diseases. I'm sick of talking about this shit.
Was she talking about it before?
Oh yeah. Yeah. She went back, and I think one of her tweets was she's been tweeting about this since January 28th.
Okay.
And she just wants to tell all her family and friends that she was right. But she had a fact where in New York in the 19th century, the water is so polluted that every ordinary individual is probably drinking or taking in 2 teaspoons of fecal matter on a weekly basis. It's a very when you talk about biospheres, and of course the Earth being one biosphere, and humanity itself, the human body being another biosphere. It's incredibly strange history there. Our connection to diseases, and the things we believe are right that are wrong, or the things that we believe are wrong that are right, in the way that we're dealing with them.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's just like you can't see what's going to happen, or like
exactly.
Like it's such like a small thing, like it's a virus.
Yeah.
And also like I'm like I feel like I've seen some video of stuff coming from Italy right now, but I haven't seen what's happening here. Like you hear about it, but you're not seeing that. And I feel like that if that ever like kicks in, that's going to be.
Oh, for sure. Well, I talked to Sarah the other day, and she said her, husband's a surgeon. He said in the hospital up there, he said it's getting bad. Like that's the Maryland area. It's getting bad. Nurses are breaking down and crying.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see, Justin.
As we sit here and talk about books. And,
that's right. The important shit.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I like it's bookselling's retail. Like it's always going to be like, but we like to think there's something honorable in it.
Something completely honorable in it. Yeah, or something completely honorable.
And it's a good time. I thought I was going to like catch up on a bunch of reading, but it hasn't happened.
Well, I've noticed that too. You're looking at your phone so much. You're checking the news so much that it's like you have to put a little bit more emphasis into connecting with the book. So yeah, it's weird times.
Can I ask you what you've been working on?
Oh no, I have no problem with that. I guess I'll be going into what will this be? I'll be going into year 3. So I spent 2 years. I realized like back around December or so, I'd read Prescott's The Conquest of the Aztecs, which is from the 19th century. It's an amazing narrative history. I mean, there's the racial stuff hasn't dated well, etc. But I realized I'm kind of feel Cortez-like, where you reach the shores and the men are scared and you burn, you just burn all the ships so that nobody can return, right? It's either Montezuma or death, right? And I guess you kind of do that with a book where you get so far along that it sort of feels a little bit like a process of madness or maybe desperation even. You can't turn back at that point. So it's just like it's a big family story. I don't even know if I'm going to publish it. I've been saying for a couple years now I'm just going to take about 10 years and step back somewhat from publishing and just work on things that feel really personal and interesting to me. And yeah, it's just all my mom's family stories. So like I have it's a section that takes place in a coal camp in the 1930s, about 20 miles from where I'm sitting right now. And then we fast forward to the mid-40s here to Beckley, which would be the story of my grandfather. And then inside of that, I'm going to put this little 80-page mini biography of my mom. Which maybe I'm looking at your face too, Justin, and get your reaction whether or not this is a good idea.
No, it's interesting to me because like I have just recently and very like just dipping my toes into researching my family history a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's really, I don't know, it's maybe not as exciting as I was hoping it was because it's just really just like a lot of British people.
Yeah, of course.
So I get to like 500 years ago and there's like one Portuguese guy and I'm like, oh, that's great. But even like the people that like, even looking at like my great grandparents, my great grandparents I didn't know, but like starting to learn a bit about them. And my mom recently told me some stuff that I need to talk to her about when we can like get together and talk about it, but like stuff about her like grandfather's past and which sounded really intense and not really, so like wanting to connect with that and kind of, I think she's also like, my mother feels like she's the only one that knows the history of her family.
Yeah.
I really want somebody to like pass that on to, and I feel like I want to do that, but obviously can't right now. But just having those stories in the world is really important.
And I'm not really doing any research. Like these are just all stories that I've known that have come from Mom. And I guess I'm wanting to get back to books that have like a practical sort of purpose. meaning like what practical, and you see this all, you see this all the time in, ancient histories, or, even Montaigne or something like that, of, the purpose of the book is explained to you fairly early on. And my readership may just be my son and my daughter, and that's perfectly fine for me, but I want to make them a damn entertaining, big epic family story. So it's going to have pictures, and then it's going to end with a whole section. We're just going to kill off all these people that you've been following, one after another. But I'm going to save my mom at the end. Like, she's going to die in real life, but she's not going to die in the book. So she'll be saved. At least that's my idea right now.
Well, I hope your children enjoy it.
That's right. They may not. My daughter's been getting more interested in my writing. Like, I have these translated editions of my books that she's seen that have come through, and she always asks to see the Scott McClanahan books, which is hilarious to hear an 8-year-old or 9-year-old girl, she is now, use your name in that way.
Were you planning on going to Europe for?
Yeah, but I think we were going to kind of wait until later in the year. And those plans, I guess, are still sort of, up in the air. There's a literary conference that happens in Spain, I think in December. And then the Germans, like, I'm like David Hasselhoff over there to the Germans. Like, I'm just huge. And they were going to try to do, like, I guess, some sort of fellowship type thing where I can hang out in Germany or whatever for a period of time. So that was, at that point, that was kind of the plan. I don't think the French version of the book is done that well. So it's kind of fallen through the cracks, it seems like.
Well, I don't know if you know this, we have a French version of Crapalachia.
Yeah, yes, and see, like, I thought I was gonna pounce and conquer France with the Sarah book, but the publisher put out the complete Bologna like 2 weeks after the Sarah book came out, the first edition of the complete Bologna, and then like 2 weeks before there was a Gary Schenkart novel. I guess he's huge in France too, and so you'd see all this press about him and no press about me.
There's still time.
Yeah, there is.
Well, I'm glad your trip didn't get canceled, at least. I don't.
Do you know that story about William Faulkner, where they asked him to come to the White House for a formal dinner, and they were going to present him with some medal? They couldn't get a hold of him. They finally found his phone number there in Oxford at Roanoke, and they called him and asked him if he wanted to come, and he's like, "Nah, I don't think I want to come. It's an awful long ways to travel just to have dinner." And that's sort of the way I feel going to a different continent to hang out with nerdy people who love books when I have my own nerdy people who love books over here.
Right.
But it would be nice. I would like to go. I really would.
I actually won a trip to the Turin book fair in Italy,
awesome.
which obviously isn't happening this year, but hopefully I'll get to go next year.
There's an Italian version of the Sarah book coming out too, but I think it's later in the year. And of course, the publisher, New York Tyrant, Giancarlo Di Trapano, he's in Naples now. So hopefully I'll get over there. Hopefully I will.
Well, if you make it to Turin when I'm there.
Yeah, I know. It'd be nice. That'd be super nice.
I want to ride a Vespa, even though I can't ride a bicycle.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like that would.
Yeah.
And one other thing I was going to mention, I've been kind of working my way through, speaking of Tyrant, the Pets anthology.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah.
Which I really enjoy.
It's a very controversial anthology. You know, it's like incredibly, people pets are incredibly controversial.
Are they?
A little bit. It seemed like it was when the book was originally a Soft Skull. Did you know that?
No. Well, I knew it was with Soft Skull, and then I saw it.
Yeah. People get man, they get charged up about pets and writing about pets.
Well, that's now that you mention it, I remember. I think it's in the introduction. He's talking about, or maybe it's the first story. There's something in there about I'm a cat person, and there's some
Yeah,
disparaging remarks about cats.
I am too. I don't like dogs.
So you have the story in that anthology that you wrote is about a Chihuahua.
Yeah, that's from my new book.
Okay.
But I told him that was because that's like supposed to be nonfiction for the book, but it's pretty fictional. But he does it. But I guess he knows that now if he happens to watch this.
So was there a dog or?
There was a dog named Midget. Yeah, a Chihuahua just like that. Most of those things, I guess, that happened, and that sort of happened or kind of happened. But yeah, Midget was a big like fear of mine for a long period of time. My Aunt Nell, she lived off of candy bars, dot pills, and Coca-Cola. And you would go to her house, and she would have like mustard from the 70s, and it would be like 1989 when you were at her house. One time, my mom mom would try to like clean her house for her sometimes when we'd go see her. And I remember she lived in Baltimore, and she got mad at me because I was throwing out she had every copy of the Baltimore Sun from the whole time she'd lived there, and they were out in her garage. And like she's getting upset about the August 8th, 1974 edition of the Baltimore Sun getting thrown out. But she's an amazing lady though. Like she's born in a coal camp. She went to Alaska to teach. This is before the Alaskan Highway was paved. And lived up there with the native people of Alaska. That's the way they did their teachers then. It was a sort of Appalachian thing as well, where you lived with your student families. And then, they would kind of rotate you around between families. So she was a great lady.
What
horrible lady too. Like, I don't want to like she could be rough. She didn't like kids, which was the weirdest thing. She was a teacher, but she hated children. Her brother was killed when she would have been, I think she was 15. Her brother was 13. That's the way the book starts off. And he had walked down to what was called the Miners Clubhouse. This was in a coal camp. And anyway, they said that he tripped, but then it turned out that he'd been hit in the head with a bottle. Somebody had thrown a bottle at him and hit him in the head, and he died instantly. And so I think that death like really, splintered and fucked up that family for a long time. Because my mom and I sometimes say like there was something there was something wrong with Nell, that she hadn't dealt with stuff like that from her childhood. But also when she was a kid though, but this is maybe going against what I just said, she was walking across the yard of the coal camp house in the backyard barefooted, and a copperhead tried to bite her, but she didn't die because they killed the copperhead, and the copperhead had some sort of growth in its mouth, this weird growth that kept, I guess, the fangs from going all the way into Nell's foot when she was like 5 or 6. This is way more information you ever wanted about out.
No, is all of this in the book?
Yeah, it's all in the book. But I've been studying these because I'm doing more third person in this book, and then I'm gonna have a section of just me, but like writer stories, because I don't know, I could probably write like Scott McClanahan stories for the rest of my life if I wanted to, but like I don't want to do that anymore. Like I don't want to publish another neurotic book. Like I've done 2 neurotic novels in a row, and I want to at least kind of reach back to that spirit in Crapalachia that's a little bit more open and tender. That's what I told Julia when I started this like 2 years ago. It's like, I'm a nice guy. Like I just need to be nice at my work.
Well, I guess
Which
like
might be a horrible idea, but I don't know.
you could just, you probably just had some stuff to exercise, and
Yeah,
you can
yeah,
go back to being nice.
yeah. But the book's going to end with my birth.
Okay.
I had a dream. Yeah, I had a dream. Like I dream about this book now at night because I've been doing like it got like all this magic stuff that's going on in this room. And I don't know if you can see behind me. These are, I have all of my dead people up on the wall surrounding me. And like, hold on, I'll show you. Like this is a picture of my grandmother. I don't know if we'll get the light. And so like I have all these pictures in this room, and it gets real spooky in here as you're writing, and like sometimes you feel yourself like being pulled into the grave. But then like some days, well, I've been drinking Red Bull writing this book for the past 2 years, but then like some days it's like you're like touching the face of God, like so I don't, but I think it's just all the sugar and all the caffeine,
Right.
that's going through your bloodstream as you're writing it. But yeah, like I keep dreaming about it. I dream about structures, because with all my books, what I'll do is I'll spend a couple years and then I just like take some time and then I just like try to destroy them. And so I'm sure I'll do this with this book too. But I dreamed the other night that I needed to end the book with my birth after all this death stuff. So I'm gonna do that. Like I'm gonna get born at the very end of it. But I may do my artistic birth, which is I was in law school when I was like 23,
Okay.
and I was miserable. And so I was so miserable that I was like, should I drop out, or like should I like commit like a suicidal too, probably. And so I like stopped going to a class and I just drove all around West Virginia. And I came back home, and my dad was wanting me to go back and complete, because I was real close. I'd been there for like 2 years, and I just had like another year left. But then my mother told me, she started crying, and she was like, "You're not that. You're an artist," and which is really silly from this little country school teacher lady. And sounds really pretentious on the surface, but it was like, that moment's always kind of meant something to me, that my mom recognized that I was an artist. So yeah, I'm just gonna put all of her stories in a book.
Do you think your children will add to it later? Do you have
Yeah,
any
that's,
thoughts on
I already have, I have this chapter I've been working on this past week and this is the way it like looks. Like this is the same desk that I've written all my books on. So like what I'll do is, and maybe this is real boring, but I have like notebooks. And so then like this past 2 days have been paragraphs 4 through 6. And so I rewrite them again and again and again and again, change them as I go along to see if like I can infuse them with like kind of weird energy. I know I'm sounding very new agey as I'm talking here, but I think it's real. I've been doing it now for a decade. And then like tomorrow, for instance, the schedule for Saturday, Sunday, and Monday are paragraphs 7 through 10 of this chapter, where we're going to the graveyard and to visit all these people who have died. And then at the end, I'm just going to put the directions to the graveyard because nobody can find it anymore.
Okay.
And then I'm going to have a blank page where my children can put in directions to my grave one day for their own children. So anyway.
I find that really touching.
Yeah, well, good. That's what I wanted to hear, because Julia's so sick of listening to me now. Like, this is her life.
me talking like this for hours. And like every day, she's so sick of listening to it now. She just like because for a while it was, oh gosh, I feel like this is boring. And I feel like this is like so like quiet, even though I have all this death in it and stuff, that I'm like worried about it because I'm not doing like my tricks, like my Scott McClanahan tricks it's always in my writing. And so, she kind of tunes out. So that makes me feel good, Justin, that you found that touching, because that's what I'm going for.
Well,
yeah, I want to write something great, like I'm wanting to like do it. But just like a great book though for like two people, rather than like a great book for a wide readership. Like I'm not interested in that.
And that they can that's technically wouldn't be finished because they can.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I have this other section too, because I have all these. It's gonna have pictures all through it, like a big fan, like a picture album, and you'll see the people, as you're finding out about them. And then towards the end, right now, there'll be a picture of me. You know how you do that thing with family pictures where it's like, who's this? And then your mom says like, oh, I don't know. Like, I wish grandma was still here. She would know. And it's weird to think that that's going to be me. And that's going to be you. Like, we're going to be people in those pictures one day, as vital, present as we are. So.
Yeah. But it's also weird because so much of the photographs I have of the people I care about are in my phone.
Yeah. And the way that's just like basic anthropology 101. Technological civilizations, they disappear. The Library of Alexandria burns, right? And oral storytelling cultures survive. Think of how many films are going to be lost because they didn't make that jump from VHS to DVD to Blu-ray to a digital file to streaming, right? There's going to be tons of shit that's just going to fall through the cracks. It was amazing, and that the individuals of that time just didn't recognize it, when it was released.
Well, I think there's already what studio was it that caught fire a few years ago? I don't know if you remember that.
Universal Fire, yeah.
And they haven't really told anyone what got lost.
Beck has a whole album of that because I think he sued him, I believe. So some of that stuff they found in Discovery. He had all of his masters are gone for Odelay and all his albums for the 90s. That you got sick of on MTV. But he had a whole album of Hank Williams covers that he did that he was thinking about releasing, I guess, around the Sea Change era, and then he ended up not releasing them. So yeah, I think so ephemeral in a lot of ways.
It's got really sad. Thinking about
that's right. I'm just like put you into the depression.
I mean, it's already everything's heavy, and then
yeah, of course.
But everything nothing the whole point of all of this has been that none of it's gonna last. So
yeah, and isn't that great too? Isn't that great that it's not? Because it gives it some meaning. If you could live forever and ever, you'd be a vampire, right? Life would feel pretty meaningless. You could do whatever you wanted to then, and you'd have no connection to anything.
Yeah. I'm going to have to mull that over on my own personal time.
Yeah.
But you mentioned that you teach community college. Do you teach writing?
We do. I guess probably the majority of our students are nurses. They go and become LPNs and RNs.
Okay.
So teach English 101, English 102, basic composition and research. And I've done it now for 15 years, which is insane to think about when you realize, that you've been in a place. For 15 years I've been there. And I've loved it. It's just given me a whole entire life. And the students that we get, they write the best essays, and they have the weirdest opinions about things. And yeah, it's just been a great job. It's just been a great job.
So my college degree is in creative writing, which I really haven't done anything with, which is fine. But I started at community college. And
Community college is amazing.
yeah,
you know.
yeah, the best
Julia
writing classes, English classes I had were all there because I don't know, just the sense of what people were getting out of it was different than once I ended up at a 4-year college.
Yeah.
Like
My experience. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say it was more just like people want to be there, like they have a purpose.
Yeah. It's been a good job. It's been a good job because I don't know if you ever learn anything in these classes. There's who was it? Robert Louis Stevenson writes about like teachers in an essay of his where he says that, the best teachers just like instill in you not like knowledge or ideas or anything, but just impressions of themselves. The energy of the self of the teachers.
Right.
What you are able to kind of carry along with you. And you get to do that at a community college because you actually get to know these people and they get to know you. And so this is from the book the other day. When we were in this room, so there was my Aunt Nell, a West Virginia school teacher, and they were visiting her Aunt Julie, who was a West Virginia school teacher who taught in log cabin type schools. And then my mom was there, who was a West Virginia school teacher. And I was a little boy. I was only like 12, and I can remember them saying like, there's 3 generations of West Virginia school teachers here. And I remember thinking in my head like, oh, I'm never going to be a teacher. I can remember thinking that, like, who would want to do that? But what we didn't realize in that room is that there were 4 generations of West Virginia school teachers in that room. And so I think about those women a whole lot, especially when I'm on a day-to-day basis, meeting with students and not too many jobs. I guess you have a job sort of like that, where at least, but your public's probably so, I don't know, you probably have your regulars, but I get to have an intense experience with, a group of 15, 20 people for 4 to 5 months, as intense of an experience as you can have when you're talking about somebody's writing and their voice and all that type of stuff. And then I get to switch it over, right? Then I get a whole new group of people. Julie and I, because Julie's mom was a kindergarten teacher, my mom was a 5th grade teacher, and they all have those same big giant like buttons. The button like that were like rulers or a big apple. Yeah. In their wardrobe, and they're all a little crazy. Like elementary school teachers, they go a little batshit after a while because they're around kids. And I was talking to my mom about that, and she's like, it's weird. She's like, I just kept getting older, and they remained 5th graders, right? Year in, year out, they were still 5th graders. Year in, year out, they were still little, 10-year-old kids. So yeah, it's a weird sort of experience, but I love it.
I feel like community college is a little easier too, because I still have like this impression of when I went from high school to community college and just how much more mature it was and like calm.
Yeah. And I mean, we have quite a bit of that because I think our average student age is 28. I want to say. So we're not like a typical 4-year, college and university. Most of our students, are older. And I'm a bit burnt out with it at this point in time. That's also very disturbing when you realize you can say the same joke from year to year and they laugh at the same place, right? We're little robots almost in the way that, we behave. So I think that messes with your brain a little bit. Maybe makes you, for someone like myself who can get real cynical real quick, makes you a little cynical about the nature of people. But what's been wonderful about it with writing is so much of writing is not about writing. It's like making a life for yourself where you can write. And a college teacher is like one of the last dictatorial jobs left in the world, where you're kind of your boss to a certain extent. I think I've noticed it changing over the past decade or so, but I've just been able to kind of arrange my life, to give myself that time to do what it is that I want to do, because that's my prayer, when you can sit in a room by yourself and try to, go after something, and some days get there and some days you don't even get close. So that's been meaningful.
Yeah. Well, more to think about, but that's
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know.
It made me think, Flaubert said there's like 3 types of writers. There's priests, great writers. There's priests, there's prophets, and there's propagators, right? There's those that just, okay, you got a swimming. What I was just going to say about the propagators, that the business of books, there are those who are just, they're going to write this because this was a hit last year. But, I've always wanted to be, forget prophet type stuff. I'm not interested in William Blake type reality, but I've always felt like I wanted to be a priest of this stuff. I wanted to spend my time with it, and I wanted to get to know others, right, inside of those books. So yeah, I don't know where I was going with the Flaubert notion, but I was going there somewhere before our video dropped out.
Right. Sorry about that.
It's funny though, I did a Skype session with this Spanish journalist on Tuesday, and that was wild. He kept asking me about what was he saying? He's like, the Scott character is not very male. Right? He cries all the time. He's always crying. So that's what he kept doing. So this has been, don't tell the Spanish journalist, but this has been a much more pleasant experience.
Okay.
He's passive aggressive. That's what he kept saying. He's passive aggressive. I was like, yeah, he is. He cries a lot. That he does. I told him he was like Achilles. Oh, and then this was the other funny thing, is we started talking about Spanish literature. I was telling you, I love Javier Morales and Enrique Villamatar, or whoever. And I realized as I was saying that he does not like these writers.
Okay.
And then he said, this is the books about books. That's what he said. I was like, ooh. So anyway.
Well, when will that interview be?
Probably soon, I would say.
I guess you won't be able. I assume you don't know Spanish, so you won't.
No, he interviewed me in English, so yeah, I don't even know what I'll end up sounding like on there.
Oh.
It's weird too with interviews. That's what I was thinking like this morning. Sometimes like I used to like give so much, and now I think I've kind of got worn down by like being interviewed, that I like give like so little. And I do a lot of like, oh, I don't know, like that sort of thing. So it's nice to be able to sit here and talk with you. And
yeah, I used to have like a vague side gig as a journalist, which was really like I wrote film reviews for a while, and it was all about like they were all movies I didn't like. It was like the worst stuff. But then there was like a handful of times where I got to like interview people, and one time I interviewed Andy Garcia on the phone, and I thought it went awful. I was like, he thinks I'm so stupid. But once I like typed everything out, it was fine, because what you kind of lose like this like the tone, and you really get that he's like you're getting information out of him, so it's fine.
Yeah, of course.
Great. And then, but I was thinking about, because I haven't like had to do an interview with anyone in a while. And one time I interviewed this guy. He was a stuntman named Buddy Joe Hooker.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it's like, I'll send you the link to the interview, because it was like literally best conversation I've ever had. He was just like really kind.
Yeah.
And I'm the like exact opposite from him, where I'm like, I have to like get drugged up to get on a plane, but he's
That's right.
like riding in jetpacks and like getting hit by cars and stuff. And
Yeah, Mark Maron. I don't really like the Mark Maron podcast per se, but he interviewed a stuntman. I really love that. Like a couple months ago, and the stuntman was talking about crashing a car, how you don't get hurt, and he was like, you have to brace and you put your chin down. People get killed because they have that head up.
oh, okay.
But you put that chin all the way down into your chest, and you can brace your body for the impact that it's gonna take. There's some little stuntman wisdom. I just sprinkle
Well, one of the
down.
things I remember asking him was that he was like, is there anything you like feel like you couldn't do? And he's like, as long as you gave me enough like time and preparation, like I can figure it out.
Yeah.
There's the guy in like one of the Rambo movies, he jumped off the waterfall or whatever.
Yeah, probably a lot of that is just like problem solving. Like,
yeah.
How would we do this and not get someone killed?
Yeah.
Little stuntman geometry.
Yeah, no, it's like, and he was like ambulatory and seemed to be together, so I don't think he hurt himself too much.
Well, the stuntman I think that Maron interviewed was missing a leg, I want to say. Something happened to the leg, but I want to say that was not connected to his stunt work. He was on, I can't remember. I'm not even going to make up the reason, but I think he was on like some sort of thing, got like an infection in his leg when he was like doing something out in the wild. So,
what a life.
Yeah, life of a stuntman. I used to be I don't know if you've ever watched NASCAR, but when we don't watch it anymore, and my dad doesn't watch it anymore because it's Trump, he says. They all love Trump and NASCAR. But we used to be big NASCAR fans circa 1985. In 1985, my favorite driver was Harry Gant, and he drove Hal Needham's Skull Bandit. Burt Reynolds and Hal Needham had their own NASCAR team for a period of time, and I was always on the side of, I had a little Hal Needham Skull Bandit car that handsome Harry Gant, like he was a very handsome man, but he was like kind of older though too.
Right. That was my mom's favorite driver.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
See?
And
he was a gentleman too. He was just like a Virginia gentleman, and you could tell he was a good man.
Yeah, I remember so I grew up with that stuff too. My dad was a Volkswagen mechanic.
Yeah.
His hobby was that he would drag race Volkswagen Beetles. And so we were all in that culture for a while, and I forget what it was. My mom was like raising funds for someone. I think like their house had burned down or something. And so she got all this stuff for this raffle together, and one of it was like one of Harry Gant's bird suits, like his driving suit that he had signed. And I feel like she had a photo of him that was signed. And then I still have this photo of we went to a Ford dealership when I was 5, and I met Bill Elliott.
Yeah, that I did the exact same thing. I bet they had that same car going to every Ford dealership around that time, and it would have been like 85-ish, 86-ish, somewhere around there. Yeah, the Bill Elliott car.
Well, he was there. I got to meet him, and he signed
a poster.
Oh,
that's cool. He didn't come to Rainell, Justin.
And then they interviewed me, and I was on the news, and I was that like annoying little kid that like missed everything. And they're like, oh, he's just adorable. And so so I met him. And I think Kyle Petty was there too.
Yeah.
I didn't care about him.
I liked Kyle Petty, but for like stupid reasons. Like when probably like 89, 90, I started liking Kyle Petty because he started growing that curly hair out longer underneath his, which is so stupid. But yeah, I was a Kyle Petty fan for a little while.
Yeah, he was like
my dad was always a Darrell Waltrip fan, and then he changed into a Dale Earnhardt fan, like most Chevrolet guys did about probably 85, 86.
I went with some friend. I was in high school, so it was like late 90s, maybe like 2000, went to Charlotte with some friends, and we went, and part of the reason was my friend wanted to go get like he was trying to get into school for like some auto, like
Yeah.
really like high-end auto repair school that was in Charlotte, obviously. And so we ended up going to like the Dale Earnhardt complex that was there.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I bought my dad a lug nut, one of his lug nuts, and it was his birthday. So we were coming back, and I called him and I told him, and he's like, well, I don't like Dale Earnhardt. I'm like, I know, but still, like, it's a big deal, So
Yeah. My dad, there's that story in the collected works. My dad like beat up a guy at Charlotte Motor Speedway because we were coming out. We went to that all-star race. This is when I was in like 9th grade. Just when you're like, you don't want to hang out with your dad, but for some reason we got stuck with him and his friends. One of them was a butcher. There's some rough guys.
Right.
Well, anyway, we went to the race. We came back out, and there was a guy on our car who was writing in the dust that he was from West Virginia too. And I can remember my dad yanked that guy off his car. I can remember the butcher was like, "You ride on a man's car, it's a good way to get your ass kicked, boy." And the kid was like drunk, really drunk. It looked like to me he was only about like 16, 17. My dad like shaking him around, pushing him away. And I can remember like, "Stop it, Dad. Like, what are you doing? Like, settle down." But he was like that at the time, my dad was.
Right. My dad had this story. I might have been at Charlotte too. It was there at Bristol. That was the ones we would go to, but I don't even want to repeat the story because it's kind of gross. But he would love, it was such a stupid story, and he loved telling it, and it was just embarrassing every time because it made him just look so, just the worst.
Yeah.
It was no violence. It was more like bodily function related. So I want to get into it. But both my parents just love telling people that story. But I think that's part of NASCAR, or at least used to be, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like they've cleaned it up some, maybe. But.
Yeah. Well, I had a girlfriend when I was in college who was from Huntington, Long Island. And somehow she wound up in West Virginia going to college. And she got so obsessed with NASCAR because it was just so foreign. And so I went to a few races when I was like, a sophomore, junior age in college. My dad and I went to a race with her. And at that point, you could tell it was like, this is so different than like the NASCAR of my childhood, which was, just rednecks and big women in bikinis. And, that sort of kind of feel, which was amazing, just the energy of that. It felt much more kind of very, typical sporting event than what it was. It was really special, or at least it felt like it when I was, 5, 6 years old. Oh, I have another story about my dad that I just remembered.
Yeah, let's do that.
Our friends Misha and Matt, they were at our house a couple of weeks ago before like it started getting scary. And I remembered this. I wrote a story about it. We were outside. My dad was always real particular about his vehicles, and I was always the person who had to wash his cars. And his cars, he always had Oldsmobiles, like a brand new Oldsmobile, and he'd trade him in about every 3 years. And his truck was always a Chevy S10, blue Chevy S10. Each and every time he'd get a new. And one day I was out washing the car, and we saw this possum come up over the hill. And I was probably like 12 or so. My dad was talking to the next door neighbor, and this possum had like a hole in its side where it looked like somebody had shot it. And my dad was like, he said, "You go get that damn thing." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "Go hit that damn thing over the hill." We lived on the side of this mountain. And so I was like, "I'm not doing that." He's like, "Go hit that damn thing over the hill." And so I took the broom, but I started getting real nervous as I got towards the possum. This is in the middle of the day, and the possum was so like injured that it wasn't, even playing possum, but it just started hissing at me. And so I got like
I kept getting scared. I'd hit it real lightly. And so my dad came over and ripped the broom out of my hand and goes back with the broom, bam. And I can remember the poor possum selling over into the weeds. And that was like my dad circa Scott's childhood. Like there was something like that, every other week with that old guy.
My dad caught a possum on our porch in a milk crate. And I have this memory of going to school. It was like winter. So everything was like frosted. And maybe I'm like mixing up the memory in my head, but he tried to kill it with a propane tank by like gassing it. And that didn't work. And so I think he just bludgeoned it. But it's also just kind of like, why did you trap it? Like, why is that? Like maybe it's been causing problems, but it seemed extreme.
Well, it makes me think I have another possum story with my dad, which happened years before the first possum story I told you. But the possum kept getting in our trash in the back. And I was like a little boy. I can remember I was eating oatmeal, Quaker Oats, and I had Zippy Zoo vitamins, which was like the Kroger brand of Flintstone vitamins. I can still remember sitting there at the table. And I guess my dad was going to work. It was like 6:30 in the morning. And he heard the possum that had been getting in our trash for like the past 3-4 weeks. And I walked over to the door. He went out in the back. He reaches into the trash can, yanks the possum up by the tail, starts walking through the backyard, and then starts swinging the poor possum around his head. And in my memory too, I can see the possum's face each time it came around. Each time it came around, and he tossed the thing. There's a lot of animal cruelty at the end of it.
So he just didn't, it wasn't specifically possum related.
That's right. Okay. Oh God. But my dad's on Prozac now, so he's like a completely different guy. He's a completely different man. Sometimes I tell these stories and Julia's like, I can't even imagine him being like that because he's just a sweet old man now.
What's weird about my dad, he passed away about a decade ago.
Yeah.
But for the longest time, I thought he was a redneck. He was like a mechanic and like, but he was really just like a hippie with like, and just like out of time. Like it was just like looking back and like what his interests were and like, he was barefoot all the time and.
Yeah, like my dad, like he was just I don't even think he's a redneck. He's more like a country boy, but like his version of the 60s, like it's like Neil Diamond.
Right.
Like he wouldn't be a hippie, but he'd go see Neil Diamond circa 1970 down in Charleston. Besides all of his, country music, like he was obsessed with country music. But even his country music was, Merle Haggard and Waylon Jennings and that sort of, like he almost got his kind of whole ethos from that sort of work. From that sort of
there's
work.
a really, like I think I would have to do more research in it, but I think there is this kind of like weird 60s Southern generation that's
for sure.
out of place or like different than what kind of gets stereotyped.
Yeah. He just sits around, watches old cowboy shows now. He has the Western Channel.
Okay.
And he'll text me sometimes too, where he's like, that old Brett Maverick really got him today. Telling me about some Maverick episode. Or he'll see somebody in a Gunsmoke episode. Like, did you know he's an extra? You can see him. He's in the episode there with Matt Dillon, right? Talking to him. It's funny.
Now I have to go revisit all of that.
I know.
Now I'm gonna have to sit and think about my family.
Yeah, there you go.
Thanks for this.
That's always a good thing. It's always a good thing. Well, all you can do is tend your garden. That's what Julian always say. At the end of Candide, Voltaire's Candide, and what's the answer to everything? Well, tending your own garden. So those are my last words of wisdom.
No, I think that's a good place to stop.
Sounds good.
Okay. Well, thank you for doing this, and
Yeah, this is fun, Justin. I appreciate it.
Good.